Slavoj Žižek is here. He is a philosopher who describes himself as a complicated communist. The New Republic once described him as the most dangerous philosopher in the West. He has written on topics ranging from Karl Marx to the animated film Kung Fu Panda. Earlier this month, he spoke at Occupy Wall Street. I am pleased to have him here at this table. In this initial conversation, we'll try to understand not only where he came from, what does he believe, and his observations on what he sees today in terms of the political environment. So welcome.
Thanks very much. I'm honored to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
For a long time, I watched PBS. It's much better than all those other channels on...
Well, on behalf of PBS, I thank you.
Thank you.
We're pleased to have you in the audience. I hope occasionally you'll be amused, occasionally you'll learn something, occasionally you will find reasons to throw something at your television.
No, I will tell you very seriously that I learned through channels like PBS to get rid of this European arrogance, you know. We Europeans, through
indeed,
intellectual, vulgar United States. No, you don't get, especially in this present turn towards education or whatever public TV, which should more serve social needs, so that, you know, they are cutting off all intellectual stuff from TV programs. Europe is much worse than United States.
In terms of its intellectual arrogance and...
No. In terms simply of the true vivacity of intellectual life. Don't be ashamed, even intellectually, to be Americans.
Do you like America?
Why not? I'm saying this absolutely sincerely. Although, I must add, as an amusing remark, please don't take it too seriously. You know who was absolutely fascinated with America?
Who?
Stalin. When he was asked in late 20s, can he define the ideal profile of a Bolshevik communist? He said a combination of Russian tenacity, fidelity to a cause, and American dynamic, pragmatic spirit.
Why are you fascinated by Stalin?
It's a very sad story. Far from me being in any way crypto-Stalinist, I think that the Stalinist phenomenon in the 20th century was something so terrifying, things went so monstrously wrong, that we don't yet really have a theory, a real understanding of what went wrong. I don't buy all these standard explanations, you know, fanatics ready to sacrifice living people for the idea or whatever. All this is way too simple for me. Things went so terribly wrong, in a totally different way from fascism.
And they hated everybody. There was a process. There wasn't any specific group. It was everybody, including each other.
Absolutely. This is, for example, already one thing that people don't get it. It was a suicidal regime. I mean, are we aware of the monstrosity at the climactic point of the Stalinist terror, mid-30s? You know what was absolutely the most dangerous place to be? A member of Central Committee. Look at the names in the Central Committee from 34 to 37.
One by one, boom, boom, boom.
80% boom, boom, boom.
Right.
What? So, you know, it's not... This is already the wrong perception. Some elite group of fanatical communists killing ordinary people. No, killing each other.
In fact, the man who was doing the killing in Barrio, they went boom, boom to him.
This is why, at the end, but this is why Beria probably, if not organized the death of Stalin, prevented doctors' help, because Beria knew what Stalin was doing. When Stalin nominated a new secret police boss, he immediately nominated someone who was formally just second in command, but whose task was to prepare a dossier to get rid at a later stage and of him. So Beria knew he's next. He's next in the line to be shot.
So tell me what you do.
I'm lucky. I'm not kidding. There is irony in it. And my, ironically, gratitude goes to communist regime. You know why? In the early 1970s, 73, when I finished my postgraduate studies, I was already accepted to be assistant professor, to make a career there.
This was where?
73, Ljubljana, Slovenia, ex-Yugoslavia.
Right.
Then immediately, afterwards, like a couple of months after, there was a counter-offensive of hardline communists, the last Indian summer of hardline communism. So, I didn't get a job For 6-7 years, I was unemployed, but it wasn't too bad. I was doing translations and so on, supported by my parents. And then a miracle happened. Then they got me a job at some marginal institute for social sciences. The idea was, I'm not a complete idiot, so they gave me a job, but marginal institute to prevent public influence and contact with students. I'm still there. It means permanent sabbatical. I have absolutely all the freedom to do whatever I want.
But you're known around the world, American students. I mean, you're high up on the list of sort of people that they want to hear.
Yeah, to hear it's okay, but I don't like to lose too much time with debates. I'm very misanthropic, you know. I think that most of the people are boring, stupid, and so on. I don't like to lose time. They told me, oh, you should debate with students, you will discover new ideas. Maybe not. Maybe it will be just loss of time, you know.
Well, isn't there a dance place named after you in Buenos Aires?
This is such a brutal irony. It's not a joke what I will tell you now. Yeah. People think, oh, I'm extrovert, half crazy, but I have my problems. Never in my life, and never is not a metaphor for just once a year, never did I dance or sing. I'm psychologically unable to do it.
You never could dance? No. You don't have this
motor
skills?
No, it's too obscene. It's too, no, it's the obscenity of gestures. I cannot do it.
Yeah. So why do they think you're the most dangerous philosopher in the West? Or at least why did one writer for the New Republic say that? What is it you do or say that makes people think you're dangerous?
It's some things that I wrote about violence, connected with what the author misread as my sympathy, which is absolutely not here for Stalinism and tough regimes, which is madness. Sorry, but I was some kind of a dissident, not the hard one, but enough not to get a job, no? Plus, although it's very ambiguous, my critical stance towards the politics of the State of Israel towards Palestinians, although my position is there very differentiated. I totally agree with those who claim that you never should compromise with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is, for me, the primordial zero-level form of ideology. You have certain social conflict, and you try to resolve it by blaming some outside intruders and so on.
Looking for a scapegoat.
Yeah. You know why I brought out these dangers of the Zionist politics? Look, I see something terrible happening lately. I hope you and other intelligent people also noticed it. First, it was Breivik, the crazy guy from Oslo, who was not so crazy. Unfortunately, he had a consistent ideological vision. Do you notice that he is a strange case of Zionist anti-Semitism? On the one hand, he totally supported the State of Israel throughout the Palestinians, Arabs. At the same time, he's clearly anti-Semitic. For example, he writes that in Europe, there are not too many Jews, it's okay. In the United States, that's in his manifesto, you have 6 million Jews, it's too much, and so on, so you will have to deal with it. But wasn't something similar, for example, here on Fox TV with Glenn Beck? Yes. He was fired, made anti-Semitic, at the same time, totally pro-Zionist. And what I really am terrified with is that some hardline Zionists in the State of Israel are ready to make a pact with this kind of Zionist anti-Semitic, for example, American Christian fundamentalists. The idea is we tolerate your internal anti-Semitism if you allow us to play the same game with Palestine. And it makes me very sad for the Jewish people whom I like immensely. I think that something that the way they are treating Palestinians will decide their character. Will they become just another nation state, or will what made them so great in the history of humanity survive? But again, we live in crazy times. This is misread as, I'm anti-Semitic or whatever.
I hear you. Tell me about this film the forthcoming film. It's called The Pervert's Guide to Ideology, directed by Sophie.
No, we did the first one, which did relatively well, Pervert's Guide to Cinema, and now we repeat the same formula. We take mostly the formula is documentary clips or clips from well-known films, and just giving a twist to them. For example, one with ideological critical axis. For example, one that we really like, it worked well, is we all saw James Cameron's Titanic.
Indeed. And then we saw Avatar.
Avatar, isn't too low to mention. But in Titanic, you remember the final moment when Leonardo DiCaprio character is dying and freezing?
Right.
Then when Kate Winslet notices that he is dead, she pushes him away into the water while shouting, "I will never let you go, I will never let you go." It's a crazy, and from here I propose a crazy, but I think accurate reading of the film, that it's not really even a love story. It's a variation on that reactionary motive of Captain's Courageous. A rich, spoiled girl is in a life crisis, and the function of Leonardo DiCaprio is to bring some of the lower class vitality, to restore her ego, literally. He draws the image of her, and then, after doing this, he can disappear. It's a little bit like E.T. goes home, but he goes down, no?
Yes.
And so I love doing this, which is why you mentioned it, very kind of you. I'm not saying I love the movie, but in a way, I admired Kung Fu Panda. It appears just a stupid cartoon. No, it's what I admire in the movie is the following. Everyone noticed it. On the one hand, the movie mobilizes, all that, let's call it Oriental military mystique, Kung Fu faith, warrior discipline, all that stuff. At the same time, the movie is totally ironic, making fun of its own ideology. What is so fascinating is that although the movie makes fun of its own ideology all the time, the ideology survives. And this is how cynicism functions. If I'm permitted to tell my favorite story, a wonderful anecdote about Niels Bohr, the Copenhagen guy, which best exemplifies this
nuclear scientist.
Yeah, that one, yeah. No, he was an extraordinary spirit. A friend visited him in his country house, farmer's house, where he went for the weekend to res dacha in Russian. And the friend noticed there above the entrance to the house a horseshoe, which I don't know how it is here in Europe. It's a superstitious item preventing evil spirits to enter the house. Yes.
So you see it on barns throughout the South.
Yeah, in Europe also. So the friend asked Niels Bohr, "But wait a minute, aren't you a scientist? Do you believe in this?" Niels Bohr said, "Of course, I'm not crazy, I don't." So the friend asked him, "Why do you have it there?" You know what Niels Bohr answered?
No, I can't wait to find out.
Yeah. He said, "Of course I don't believe in it, that it says, but I have it there because I was told that it works even if you don't believe in it." That's unfortunately our ideology today.
Or I'm hedging my bets.
Yeah, like you don't have to believe in it, but belief still functions. Like, think about another thing which always fascinated me. Things like Santa Claus. You ask the parents, "Do you believe in Santa Claus?" They will tell you, "I'm not crazy, I buy that." Then you ask the child, "Do you believe?" He will say, "No, I'm not crazy, I just pretend not to hurt my parents." And, so a belief functions as a social category, even if no one believes in it. I think this is crucial to understand how things function today.
What's the role of philosophy, you think, in the 21st century today?
I don't exaggerate it, but also I don't underestimate it. Let me be very clear. First, I claim that the time of philosophy is coming. Why? Look just at the ethical questions we are debating. Abortion, is it permissible or not, biogenetic manipulations. These are simply new dilemmas where, let's face it, you cannot simply apply old traditional wisdoms or rules. We have to think. At the same time, I don't think philosophers can bring ready-made answers. But philosophers can do something very important today. They can, and this is no less important than correct answers, they can allow us to ask the right questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they do.
Because isn't it that often today, look at, for example, ecology, look at racism, tolerance, we know we have a serious problem, but the very way we formulate the problem, it's part of the problem. For example, tolerance.
You're singing my song.
Yeah, but you see, and here...
How you ask the question determines the answer.
Yeah, and this, I think, is our task.
Right.
So when friends who even laugh at me as a philosopher, nonetheless, with some kind of a superstitious respect, some ask me, but tell us, or at Wall Street they ask me, but tell us what to do, what... No, I don't know what to do. I don't have a ready-made
You're talking about the
answer.
fact you went down to speak to the people at Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
And they all want to know, tell us, you know, help us understand what to do.
Yeah, no.
And you said no.
No. Well,
what did you tell them, though? What was your message to those people that are down there?
It's time to think. That my basic message was, and I think it was totally correct, that they shouldn't fall in love with themselves. By this I mean, oh, what nice time we have here, this immediate freedom, ecstatic, back to old hippie days. Yes. No, the true problem is the day after. What of this will be translated into our daily lives, really make some changes and so on. And for this, there are no fast answers, which is why, on the other hand, I also don't totally agree, although it was probably well meant, with what President Bill Clinton said. These protests are okay, but they should translate into concrete demands what they want. No, it's a little bit deeper. We all know that our societies are approaching some deeper deadlocks, dilemmas, from ecology to, status of capitalism, intellectual property, biogenetic. These are deep problems. And I want to make this very clear so that I will not be perceived as a kind of a nostalgic idiot. I'm only a communist in the sense that communism is for me the name of these problems, which are problems of the commons. Like, right. Nature out there is our common ground, right, and so on.
I got you.
I'm not communist at the level of answers. I'm the first to admit 20th century
in the area of Marxism-Leninism.
We can learn something of Marx, but not in the sense of easy solutions. Like the Leninist party is certainly not the answer. The 20th century communism it did some good things here and there, universal education, blah, blah, but basically, let's face it, it was a fiasco. And we have
Why was it a fiasco in your judgment?
I don't have a clear theory, and this is why I'm so obsessed with the Stalinist phenomenon. Because I think it's really mysterious how something which here I disagree with right-wing or liberal critics.
Right.
Look, at the beginning, October Revolution did have a tremendous emancipatory potential. It did have. It liberated women, society exploded, and then we know into what it turned. It was something much more terrifying than fascism. Let me simplify it. Fascists were bad guys who said they planned to do bad things, and then,
did.
What a surprise, they did it, yes. Right. This is why in fascism, or especially Nazism, you don't have the figure of Nazi dissidents. While Stalinist communism even all the time had to fight with disappointed communists who, at the same time, let me be clear.
The Gulag started early.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not saying, at the beginning everything was okay and so on. This Trotskyite story. Right. If only Lenin were to survive 2 years more, made a pact with Trotsky against Lenin. Yeah. No. There was a kind of at least general tendency that Leninism had to become Stalinism. I have no illusions there, but that's what makes it truly tragic.
There were no illusions that Leninism had to become Stalinism.
No, yeah, it had to, in a way. I don't think there was a real alternative in the sense of, if only...
But Gorbachev thought he could reform communism. That was his own motivation. And then Yeltsin comes along and says, no, you can't reform it, you have to,
Yeah, but the problem with Yeltsin, I think...
What was the problem with Gorbachev, though? Was it reformable in your judgment?
That communism, no, absolutely not. Absolutely. On the other hand, the problem with Yeltsin was that he did it in a very chaotic way. Right. Like, if you look at how the Chinese did it. They started privatization, capitalism in a very intelligent way. They started with small consumerist industry, tested it there, then slowly expanded it.
Right.
The Russians did it exactly the opposite. They started it with banks and natural resources, so they got the most non-productive capitalism which you can imagine. New rich guys, tycoons, whose capitalism was not productive. They just were selling their natural resources and so on.
The oligarchs.
The oligarchs,
exactly.
yeah.
Now, here's an idea that you have propounded, which is the notion that while often capitalism and democracy have gone hand in hand, you're suggesting that with the rise of China, with a kind of state capitalism, you may very well not see, for the first time in history, or democracy follow. And that may be a threat to the order in itself.
No, what I'm saying is that, again, I'm not just blindly anti-capitalist. Let's be serious. Capitalism is the most productive social order in the history of humanity. And let me be very clear. Now, some radical leftist will lynch me for saying this, but can you imagine in the entire history of humanity, an era in which so many people lived such relatively free lives and safe lives in relative welfare as, let's say, in Western Europe in the last 50, 60 years. So let's, as they put it in the church, let's recognize to the devil what belongs to the devil. What I'm saying is that these times are passing. And
what times are passing?
These times of democracy being, capitalism able to claim that it
is a forerunner to democracy.
That what happens for me in China is that we have, let's be clear, we have a capitalism which is more dynamic, productive, at least it looks now, than Western capitalism. And don't put it just on China.
And democracy in the United States is in a sense of paralysis. Over making decisions that are in the interest.
And again, I don't believe those who said, if China were to have democracy, it would have been even better. Unfortunately, it wouldn't. Because it's not just China. Look at Singapore is the key, I think. Do you know that when Deng Xiaoping started his reforms, he visited Singapore?
Lee Kuan Yew.
Here you are touching a key point. My German friend, Peter Sloterdijk, a philosopher, when he asked himself a beautiful question. Can we imagine to which person from our time they will be building monuments 100 years from now in the future? He said Lee Kuan Yew. Because he invented so-called capitalism with Asian values, which means, to cut things short, authoritarian capitalism. He invented the formula. And even, Deng Xiaoping said, this is a model for all China.
That's exactly
and this is what I would worry about.
More than that, he sent lots of Chinese to Singapore to study what they had done in order to bring it back.
So again, I'm not saying you liberals are traitors. I'm saying if you are a sincere liberal, start thinking about this. How really to save the freedoms that we enjoy.
Let me move you to the Arab Spring and what your observations are about what's happened from Tunisia to Libya.
I think it's an extremely positive thing. Because, we in Western Europe, at least, and here, all the time we dismissed Arabs are those guys, you can mobilize them en masse only on anti-Semitism, religious fundamentalism, nationalism. No, here we got what we wanted. A secular revolt for freedom, democracy, and so on. Of course, this brings...
Not about ideology at all.
Okay, here, maybe I disagree, because what do you mean by ideology?
Well, I don't know. You tell me. But it was about dignity. It was about dignity. It was about responsibility. It was about
freedom. Solidarity, all those things. It was a wonderful event. And,
But it wasn't religious based. It wasn't.
No, it clearly wasn't.
There was no ism behind it. Or not?
Yeah, what do you mean by ism?
Well, I don't...
Because,
communism, fascism... some other kind of ism.
You know what's my problem? That I don't believe in this. Like, for me, ideology often, I don't think there is some kind of innocent out of all ideologies consciousness or whatever. Aren't we all the time in ideologies?
Yes,
in the sense of,
right.
of course you can say no ism, but if you look closely at what people were demanding them, you can clearly see what they took from the Arab tradition, from the Western tradition. I don't believe in this.
You think they're defining some new...
Yeah, potentially. Potentially.
Socialism could have been another
potentially.
ism,
Because
so the Arab Spring may very well evolve some new idea of
May.
And
but
what will prevent it from doing that, in your judgment?
The combination of, I think, instead of fully supporting it, all the compromising stance of the West, for example, it's clear in Egypt that now, I'm not saying it has to happen, but the most probable outcome, and I pray that it will not happen, is, as friends from Egypt are telling me, an obscene pact between Muslim Brotherhood and the army, a kind of obscene exchange where Muslim Brotherhood gets ideological hegemony.
Right.
In exchange, the army keeps its corrupted privileges and so on, gets the power. Yeah, because remember something, the army is still 100% the old Mubarak army.
Indeed.
Yeah, so
the people who were in control of the army were put there by Mubarak.
Yeah, totally. So you see here we have an example of how a space...
But they did not come to his aid at the crucial moment. They did not come to save him at the crucial moment.
Because they made probably a correct judgment that this would require then to...
Or as they say, they knew which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah. Too much of their pressure. What I'm afraid is that, again, the West will again do it wrong. And for me, for example, how can you... Arabs are quite right of being sensitive to this. How can you preach democracy to Arabs and fully stand behind Saudi Arabia? I mean, I'm sorry to tell you.
There's a contradiction there.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, but when we speak about personal freedoms, the role of women, sexual freedoms, Iran is a paradise compared with Saudi Arabia. And do you remember in Bahrain, there was a genuine revolt.
Yes.
It was crashed down high. Saudi Arabia intervened there. I don't remember any...
Well, what the Obama administration would say, and others would say, the European administration would say, you have to judge these on a country-by-country basis.
Yeah, but this is just a nice way, masked as wisdom, to say ruthless opportunism and so on. And it's so typical how the West intervened.
But you can't find one, it does not have to be a philosophy that has no exceptions to it, does it?
No, but nonetheless, it's typical that where the West did intervene was precisely the wrong place, Libya. Why? Let me be clear. I have no sympathy whatsoever, even when we were witnessing these horrible scenes of Gaddafi being basically lynched by the mob. No sympathy whatsoever for him. But wasn't it clear that in contrast to Tunis, Egypt, Syria, where we had a clear democratic people's movement with program. Wasn't it blurred from the very beginning in Libya? It wasn't clear who these rebels are, what. And you see where you get. Now we learned 2-3 weeks ago that the main military commander of the Libyan resistance is kind of an ex-jihadist Al-Qaeda man. Yes. So where we ended is NATO arming Al-Qaeda. Thanks very much for that. No, they should have been a little bit more restrained, not in the sense of supporting Gaddafi.
But if they hadn't come in at the time, there would have been a huge massacre. That was their argument. That was going, the Gaddafi army was marching on to Benghazi, and if they had that was a humanitarian.
But in fact, bombing,
in fact, the humanitarian turned into something else.
Yeah. And this is the problem. What is so horrible for me is how precisely the case where the revolt was not a clearly democratic, secular revolt, precisely there the West intervened. It's sad.
What's going to happen to this movement that you see that's developing in terms of what happened at Wall Street, happening in cities? Does it have, as they say, legs? Does it have the capacity to grow into something that has
it's
power?
It's not yet decided.
It's not sure yet.
It's not sure, which is why I think now it's not yet the time to make it utopian in the bad sense. You know, the time to make plans for power or whatever. It's time for reflection. It's time to ask the basic questions. Do we even this is for me the tragic thing. We all feel something is wrong with the system. Yeah. But we have even a vague
because of
idea.
Income disparity, because of a whole range of things.
Yeah. And we know it cannot just be solved by a little bit of social democratic legislation.
It has to be what?
A more radical, I claim.
And what would radical be?
It's very clear. Some deep transformation of the capitalist system itself in the long term. Here problems begin. I don't think there is a clear idea, but you know, we will have to think about it, because what I'm afraid that you can say, okay, we cannot even imagine it. Here I have two problems. They may amuse you. First one is, did you notice how, in what a strange way today, the terms possible, impossible function? Like, if you speak about science, everything is becoming possible. You know, through biogenetic or cloning, we will be able to live forever, replacing our organs, blah, blah, whatever you want. Everything will
Stem cell and all that.
Everything will be accessible to us through iPhone, blah, 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 in clouds. So here, everything is possible. But when you say, let's raise the taxes and spend a little bit more money for healthcare, impossible. So it's like my friend Fred Jameson said, we can well imagine, we do it daily, all the catastrophe movies, we can well imagine the end of the Earth, asteroid hitting Earth, but we cannot imagine a small change in capitalism, no? And the important thing is not to engage in some crazy, destructive experiments, but to open up the space of thinking. It's difficult, this, because we know how the 20th century attempts failed. I don't have any big formula. I even, ironically, in a self-mocking way, often say that, because people accuse me, I'm kind of a demagogue, stand-up comedian, magician. I said, if I'm a magician which is showing you all the time the head, but the rabbit never comes out, you know, the formula. I'm modest here. I'm just saying, which is why I like intelligent conservatives. Not reactionaries, conservatives. Honest conservatives are the ones who openly confront the deadlock and don't play games with some easy solutions or whatever.
Thank you for coming. I hope we can do this again.
I'm really proud to be here, and I hope I at least helped in dispelling some of these ideas that me and my friends have some, I don't know, dark terrorist plans. We are much more modest than it may appear. We are just saying we are approaching a crisis. It's no cause for panic, emergency or whatever, but to start thinking.
And
Thanks very much.
And asking the right questions.
Yes, thanks very much.